Saturday night at 7:30 on MPT.
Programs on MPT are made possible by our members and the following.
We at Sage Policy Group recognize that this is a challenging period for households and businesses. But Marylanders are intelligent, strong, inventive, and entrepreneurial. Eventually, this economy will bounce back stronger than ever.
University of Maryland Center for Environmental Science, leading the way on Chesapeake Bay restoration, while guiding our state, nation, and world toward a more sustainable future.
71 acres in downtown Baltimore devoted to learning, discovery, care, and service. We train the professionals who secure the health, well-being, and just treatment of Maryland citizens. We create the knowledge that cures disease and strengthens communities across the state and around the world. UMB makes the world more just, more enlightened, healthier, and more humane. We are UMB.
This program is made by MPT to enrich the diverse communities throughout our state and is made possible by the generous support of our members. Thank you.
Voting to let voters vote on pot.
There is a very sad and growing problem with children getting into their parents' edibles.
What fines do, which I know all of you agree to that it deters people from doing something they're not supposed to do.
Should beer and wine remain banned in supermarkets?
At least let the voters say yes or no.
If they can get it at the grocery store, we get everything else there, I really don't see a difference.
And career connections at the CIAA.
Decided to stop at the U.S. Marshal Service because I maybe have an interest in going into the field.
For 40 years, connecting Marylanders to their government, this is State Circle.
Good evening. The big story around State Circle this week, marijuana legalization rolls along. The House is sending the Senate a bill to set up a referendum on allowing the personal use of cannabis. Sue Copen covered the debate.
The package of cannabis reform legislation lawmakers are being asked to approve includes two bills. House Bill 1, which calls for a voter referendum in November's general election on a constitutional amendment allowing anyone 21 or older to use or possess cannabis starting July 1st, 2023. It also requires the enactment of House Bill 837, which spells out how cannabis legalization would work. The provisions of House Bill 837 include allowing an individual 21 or older to possess up to 1.5 ounces of cannabis. It sets up studies which will be used in setting standards for cannabis use, and it revises criminal and civil penalties for the use of cannabis. During House debate on HB 1, Allegheny County Delegate Jason Buckle asked for an amendment to allow local governments to opt out should the referendum pass.
We'll be able to know what the referendum passes by from Somerset County to Cecil County and all points in between. And if your voters in your county choose not to do this, they don't think it's the right thing for them, then your county government, in whatever form or fashion that may exist, can then affirmatively afterward enact a legislative act to say, hey, it's not legal here.
But the bill's sponsor, Judiciary Committee Chair Lou Clippinger, argued that would only further complicate things.
One of the bigger challenges here as we look at amendments to this particular bill is to make a change then to the Constitution later on. If, say, one of those counties changed their mind, it's going to require a constitutional amendment of some kind approved by the entire state. So that, I think, would make this a lot more confusing than it needs to be.
Others argued for an amendment to House Bill 837 that would bring the penalties for using cannabis in public in line with penalties for publicly consuming alcohol.
What fines do, which I know all of you agree to that it deters people from doing something they're not supposed to do. And I'm not telling people what to do in their own home, but when you're doing something outside your home, you have to respect the other people, that whether they agree with you or not.
Anne Arundel County Delegate Nick Kipke asked that specific regulations be added to the bill concerning the packaging of cannabis products.
And let me tell you why this is important. Throughout our country, there is a very sad and growing problem with children getting into their parents' edibles. And it's brought light to the problem of marijuana overdose.
But Kipke was told that's already been taken into consideration.
The current regulations on medical cannabis that we have on the law, the regulations, they go beyond and are stronger worded than the amendment that is presented here, which will be the baseline that the Cannabis Public Health Council will have to work from.
In the end, both bills survived without any additional amendments, sending the legislation on to the Senate. In Annapolis, Sue Copen for State Circle.
Thank you, Sue. The state is also looking at legalizing beer in grocery stores. Nancy Yamada has that story.
Milk, bread, and wine? Could it become a reality in Maryland?
If they can get it at the grocery store, we get everything else there, I really don't see a difference. So I'm for it.
It's convenience for me because if not, I would stop here. I have to go over there.
I'd go down south for vacations and things, and you can buy it in other states. So, yeah.
At the end of the day, we should have the convenience and everything else. We're going to get it regardless.
46 states and D.C. allow the sale of beer in grocery stores, and 40 of those states also allow the sale of beer and wine. And yet Marylanders haven't had that luxury since 1978. Senator Cory McCray says it's time to let voters decide on the issue with a question on the November ballot.
If the legislature doesn't have the posture or the tenacity to move in that direction, at least let the voters say yes or no.
His motivation, he wants to attract more grocery stores to move into areas widely known as food deserts, where residents are forced to shop only at convenience stores.
What happens is when a person is picking up their lettuce, they're picking up their apples, they're picking up their oranges, they may also want to pick up a bottle of wine, which then makes the residual income a little bit higher from that standpoint, because they have the access and opportunity right there.
Grocery stores in particular operate at a 1% to 3% profit margin. So the ability to add the sale of beer and wine really helps to stabilize a store in a community.
Kaylee Locklear is the president of the Maryland Retailers Association. She says their polling data shows up to 80% of Maryland voters support the sale of beer and wine in grocery stores. Who's against it? At a hearing in the House Economic Matters Committee,
parents should be able to go to the grocery store and not have their children be exposed to the alcohol advertising.
Opponents cited the negative effects of increasing access to alcohol and how small businesses might be harmed.
It should be the General Assembly that repeals it. There are more questions around this than simply, is it convenient and would you like to be able to buy your beer and wine at the grocery store?
If this issue does go to a referendum and gets a pass from voters, the reality is it will take another 2 years to work out all the details, where and how many licenses will be given out, and who qualifies as a grocer.
A lot of details to work out, but it can be done. We have 46 other states that do this, and all of this doomsday conversation, talking points don't happen. We can do it here. Maryland can make it happen.
But first, it's up to lawmakers to decide if voters will get their say in November. I'm Nancy Yamada for State Circle.
Senate Democrats are pledging to pass a paid family leave bill that has failed in recent years. Senate President Bill Ferguson and fellow Democrats announcing support for bills to give workers up to 12 weeks of paid leave to care for a family member or newborn child. The National Federation of Independent Business responded, saying that the bill creates a payroll tax that will cost workers and owners at a time when they can least afford it. The U.S. Labor Department says that fewer than 1 in 4 workers have access to paid family and medical leave. The House Judiciary Committee heard testimony this week on a bill aimed at the theft of packages left on residents' steps. The Defense Against Porch Pirates Act would make it a felony punishable by up to 5 years in prison. 30% of those in one survey said they'd been victimized. Opponents argued that increasing penalties for crime does not reduce crime and that theft is already illegal. A version of the bill 2 years ago from sponsor Haven Shoemaker was left on the State House porch. It did not get out of committee. This week, the State Board of Education voted 12-2 to rescind its emergency masking regulation following the recommendation of the state school superintendent.
I think it is the right time to return it back to local control. So I would recommend to you to consider sending it back to the locals We had a very smart response. We had very smart off-ramps. Let them decide.
A legislative committee gave its approval today. Local school boards will still make a final decision. The state's positivity rate for COVID has fallen to under 3%. Joining us for the Annapolis Face-Off this week, Delegate Eric Luedtke, the House Majority Leader, and Delegate Jason Buckle, the Minority Leader of the House of Delegates. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Jeff, for having us.
Yes, thank you.
Delegate Luedtke, the House leadership last week rolled out a package, sort of a tax relief package. Let's start with what's in that.
Sure. So building on our work last year, House Democrats led the charge on expanding our earned income tax credit, which helps working and middle class families to the largest level in America. We're taking the next steps this year. We announced a series of what we're calling family budget boosters. We're going to be exempting a number of everyday items from the sales tax to make it a little easier for families to afford them, particularly given the inflation we're experiencing. And we're also going to create a state match for something called the Work Opportunity Tax Credit that puts Marylanders who are having trouble finding a job back to work.
Give me an example of something that would be exempt from the sales tax.
Sure. So we're exempting a range of items that middle class and working class families rely on every day: diapers and baby bottles and car seats, toothbrushes and toothpaste, medical devices used by people with diabetes and elderly Marylanders. So a range of items.
Delegate Buckle, we'll get to the Republican package, but on the Democratic leadership bills, do you see anything in there that you would object to?
You know, I'm a big fan, and I think most of the members of my party, not only in Maryland, but across the country, are big fans of the government cutting your taxes. Taxes are very high, and they're hidden sometimes. You know, sometimes people don't even really understand what they're paying in sales taxes, when, how, where, how much. So I'm a big fan of any opportunity to cut people's taxes, particularly the middle class, the working class, small businesses, and families. So I don't have any particular objection, having seen and heard many of these bills through the committee process already. My concern, I guess, is do we really have broad-based tax relief for all Marylanders? And one of the things, Jeff, that's interesting, it's kind of a very technical point of tax law, but several years ago, when the federal government said we're gonna raise our standard deduction, we're going to increase the standard deduction that people file when you file for your taxes, your accountant or your TurboTax program says hit this button, you don't get to itemize anymore. Well, in Maryland, we didn't change our standard deduction to the same proportion that the federal government did, but we stopped people from itemizing too. So you take the standard deduction on your federal return, you have to take it on Maryland's return. Ours is much, much smaller. And what's happened is a lot of families, a lot of small businesses are paying more in Maryland taxes today than what they did a few years ago because of that tax change, because of that sort of behind the scenes technical tax change. That's one of the reasons why we have record revenues. We're spending more money than has ever been spent in the history of the state of Maryland. We're bringing in more money than we've ever had. And it's time to have bigger tax breaks.
So the idea is that more money is flowing into the state treasury, and nobody ever, in Annapolis at least, took a vote on raising taxes, yet taxes went up.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. We did have proposals. I have a proposal that's before the House of Delegates and the Ways and Means Committee that Delegate Luedtke and I both serve on. I have a proposal there today that would eliminate that would allow people to take the itemized deduction, even if they're using the standard deduction at the federal level. It would probably help many families reduce their state taxes. So we didn't take a vote on it, but those proposals are out there.
What's the fiscal impact of that? Because I think it's a big number.
It is. It certainly would be hundreds of millions of dollars a year. But here's the difference. When we had these discussions 3 or 4 years ago, that's always the response. We can't afford it. You know, we can't afford it. Our budget is fairly flat. It's fairly tight. Here's the reality today. We have roughly, there's estimates vary, but we have roughly a $4 billion surplus today. And the people we rely on to make forecasts, the Comptroller's Office, the Spending Affordability Committee experts, they're forecasting that we're going to have multi-billion-dollar surpluses in the foreseeable future, in the years to come. There's no way to guarantee that, but if we're ever going to do tax relief for everybody, for retirees, for just working and middle class and upper middle class families and small business owners, if we're ever going to do it, now is the time. And if we're never going to do it, let's look those people in the eye and tell them that.
Delegate Lutke, your thoughts on Delegate Buckle's bill to de-link the question of itemizing or standard deduction on your state and federal taxes?
Yeah, look, I think like a lot of proposals we've seen, including the governor's tax proposals, when you're working with the income tax, the people you benefit most are the people at the top of the income ladder. So we're seeing these proposals that would cut taxes significantly for the wealthiest Marylanders. The idea that somehow sales taxes, cuts to the sales taxes aren't going to help every Marylander. I mean, as far as I know, I hope every Marylander is using a toothbrush. So cutting sales taxes on that's going to help, right? Every Marylander with kids, diapers cost a lot of money. So, our sales tax proposals are broad-based. They will help the full range of working and middle-class Maryland families. And I think they will really help people given the challenges we're facing with inflation right now.
Now, the governor's been talking, he talked in his State of the State address about taxes on retirees. That was part of his package for this year. And Delegate Buckle, within the Republican conference, I would imagine there's support for that.
There is. And in fact, in addition to our support for the governor's bill, which is a very broad, almost universal, as it's ultimately phased in, retirement tax break, where if you're retired, if you're only receiving income from some retirement fund, your own savings, you wouldn't be paying any more state income taxes. Our caucus, Delegate Susan Krebs from our caucus, has her own individual bill that she's championed for years that has a slightly different fiscal note, a less of a fiscal note, where she simply sets caps, so I appreciate what my friend Delegate Lutke was saying about we don't want to provide tax breaks just for the top 1%, the very wealthiest. We don't think that's what our proposals do. The retirement tax proposal in particular is geared for people who are middle class, maybe slightly upper middle class. It's expensive to live in Anne Arundel County. I don't live in Anne Arundel County. Where I live, Western Maryland isn't quite as expensive. But for most of your viewers who might live in the 95 corridor, they understand this place is getting more and more expensive to live every year. And if you don't start treating people in terms of their retirement income differently for taxation, what you wind up with is people who can't afford to live here in their 60s and 70s and 80s. They can't afford to stay because the cost of living, inflation, real estate taxes keep going up and up. And yet their income, their retirement income is fixed, it's stagnant, and we're taxing it. And they're not taxing it in many other states in America. So we support that concept and think that it's fair. At some point in time, you have to do what's right.
Delegate Lutke, in Montgomery County, do you see people hitting retirement age and bolting for other states?
Well, sure, but they're moving to Florida because the weather's nice. I think the biggest factors in retirement moves have to do with weather. They have to do with family. And, certainly taxes may play a role, but the idea that we're going to cut taxes on wealthy retirees. Look, Dan Snyder, Kevin Plank, when they retire, they don't need a tax cut from the state of Maryland. The sales tax proposals we have are going to make sure that every middle class and working class Marylander has what they need to get by. And look, if I'm a retiree, I want my grandkids to be in diapers. So these sales tax cuts, I think, are the better approach.
And Jeff, I'm such a supporter of the diaper sales tax cut that I actually offered pretty much the identical bill myself, I think 2 or 3 years ago. So we have complete agreement that the diaper sales tax bill should go. I suspect it will go. It's a great bill. I don't want to cut Dan Snyder or Kevin Plank's retirement taxes. I'm guessing they have good financial advisors. They're probably not getting money out of a 401k. I want to cut somebody who worked their entire life. Maybe they worked for the government. Maybe they worked in the private sector. Now they're 65 years old. They want to stay close to their family that's working here in Maryland, and they can't afford to keep paying taxes the way the levels we have.
But before we go, I don't know that we've ever had the two of you on at the same time. I wanted to ask who has the harder job. As the minority leader, I wonder if, you're vastly outnumbered. Nobody really expects you to deliver anything. But as the majority leader, you have a supermajority and everybody thinks you're going to be able to deliver everything. True or false?
Oh, I actually think the jobs are about equally as challenging. I think there's more pressure on Democrats because we are the majority and we have to actually pass an agenda and craft an agenda. On the other hand, the speaker is the highest ranking Democrat in the House. So the buck stops with her. In the Republican Party, the buck stops with Delegate Buckle, right? So I think he's got a tough job as well.
Yeah, Jeff, I think the way I would explain it, I'm an attorney in real life. I'm a professional litigator. I have been my entire career. So I do conflict and dispute for a living. I've never lost as much as at anything in my entire life as what we lose here in Annapolis, because we are the minority party. And I think Delegate Lutke and I always look for opportunities to work together and compromise when we can. But the truth of the matter is there's an awful lot of issues out there where, the vote is predetermined when we arrive at the floor. So it's difficult. It's disheartening some days, but we believe on the minority side that there are millions of Marylanders who share our perspectives from across the state. And it's our job to keep articulating for that in good faith and find opportunities to get results when we can. So it's not fun many days, but we try to do the best we can.
Delegates Buckle and Lutke, we appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Aaron.
The CIAA basketball tournament is bringing excitement to Baltimore's Royal Farms Arena. It is also bringing career opportunities for many students. More from Charles Robinson.
My name is Janice Neesmith. I'm from Charlotte, North Carolina.
And you are?
I'm Ulysses Neesmith from Charlotte, North Carolina.
Now, who's going to win this tournament?
The J.C. Smith Golden Bulls.
The fans came ready to cheer on their respective teams with kings and queens in tow. Across the street at the Baltimore Convention Center, the mission is different. You'll find leather shoes walking the aisles on a singular mission.
I think it is kind of hard as of right now finding entry-level positions, and plus especially being in a pandemic and people looking for like different types of experience and things like that. I came here to look for opportunities after I graduate, post-graduation.
In a tight job market, recruiters will make a pitch to anyone who is willing to talk and who shows up at their booth with curiosity.
I decided to stop at the U.S. Marshal Service because I maybe have an interest in going into the field. It's been very curious to me, and I just wanted to see what it was about.
So at this career fair, not only can you find a job, but you can also learn about the many HBCUs of the CIAA. Lots of cards and resumes were shared with the hope that one of these interactions will change a person's life. At the Baltimore Convention Center, I'm Charles Robinson for State Circle.
For the Political Roundtable this week, MPT's Charles Robinson joined by Steve Lash of the Daily Record. Steve, you cover all things judicial, including redistricting, where there are a whole bunch of cases out there right now.
Well, yes, thank you. The one that interests me the most is the congressional redistricting in Anne Arundel County Circuit Court that's challenged by a couple of Republican lawmakers to congressional redistricting. They're challenging it on equal protection and First Amendment grounds, saying that the Democratic control of the district is basically violates their public political association as Republicans. This, interestingly, is the same challenge that was brought in the Supreme Court a few years back to the 6th Congressional District, where the court basically ruled 5-4 that those questions of equal protection and political association are political questions that it's not up for the court to decide, that it's up for the state legislature to decide. Well, the state legislature came out and basically took the court up on its what it said, did the redistricting, and it was challenged. And now the challenge is not under the federal constitution, as happened in the Supreme Court, but under the state constitution, meaning that the question will ultimately be, does the Maryland state constitution give greater protection to challenges to the First Amendment and equal protection than the federal constitution?
So we have all these challenges going. I mean, the state legislative map is being challenged at the Court of Appeals. The Baltimore County council districts were thrown out. Time's getting short if we're going to have a primary in June.
I was going to say that we are literally under a gun to try and get an answer to all the questions that Steve has just illuminated. The thing that is very curious, they pushed the actual date for filing to next month. Problem with that is that if the districts aren't drawn, where do you run? And that is one of the bigger questions that still hasn't been answered.
Steve, you had a story on authorizing convicted felons to serve on Maryland juries. That's currently a non-starter?
Well, felons currently, convicted felons, those with a history of a felony, are barred from serving on juries from the outset. A legislation introduced by Senator Jill Carter would, the way it was introduced, would have repealed that prohibition on felons in total. It got amended on the Senate floor to say that, well, all felons except for those whose convictions were based on witness or jury intimidation. And basically, the argument there was that, well, those issues of witness intimidation and jury intimidation go to the integrity of the judicial process, the integrity of the court system, and anybody who's been convicted of that should remain forever barred from serving on a jury. Will Smith, the Democratic chairman of the Senate Judicial Proceedings Committee, accepted that as a friendly amendment, and so that's where we stand now. It's passed in the Senate to repeal the ban on felons serving on juries, except for those convicted of witness and or jury intimidation.
And Charles, we saw, I think it was this week, it's been a long week, the governor sent down a supplemental budget.
Yeah, I'm going to use a Johnny Cash reference. I hear the train coming and it's coming down the track. Well, guess what? The governor kind of knew that the legislature was going to add money back into jurisdictions in Baltimore City and in Prince George's County. So in his supplemental budget, he put the money back. Understand that I talked to the chair of the House Appropriations Committee, Megan McIntosh, and she said, I don't know how he thought that was going to get by me. And that's one of the reasons I think he said, let's go on and put that money back.
And Charles, we just have time for a sentence or two on this, but we've been reporting on the CIAA basketball tournament in Baltimore, which the city wants to have. It's coming back next year. We want multiple years of this. You've been in the arena. What's the atmosphere been?
It's electric. It is not the large crowds. I'm talking about where, hundreds of thousands of people are here, but there is an energy that is here. And most of the folks who are here, and I've met a couple of my friends who came from out of town, are having a wonderful experience.
And before we go, Charles, that is a great looking kitchen renovation project.
Thank you very much, Jeff.
Charles Robinson and Steve Lash. You can read Steve's work at thedailyrecord.com. Gentlemen, have a good weekend.
Thank you, you too.
And that is State Circle for this week. Join us every week at this time as we bring the State House to your house. We're back Monday with Direct Connection and your chance to ask the experts. Join us live Monday evening at 7. Now for all of us at MPT, thanks for watching and have a good night.
Salisbury University educates tomorrow's professionals with graduate programs to advance your career. Earn your master's online in business, nursing, or GIS. Study social work online or at Satellites in Hagerstown, Cecil, Southern Maryland, and the Midshore. Learn more at salisbury.edu. Claim your future through UMBC's new graduate programs in software engineering. Providing modern approaches to software development and implementation,